Our meeting is called to order. We will follow the agenda as posted. We do have a board member that's en route will be joining us very, very shortly. As we prepare ourselves to work through the agenda as posted, I would like to just kind of remind and caution us to be mindful of the time, both for presentations and discussion. I know that much of this will require a good deal of discussion, but I would still ask us to be mindful of the time limit so that we can appropriate the necessary amount of time to the full agenda. Having said that, we will begin with item 2.01, our transformation update. Dr. Thornton.
Thank you, Chairman Houston, school board members. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Agenda item 2.01, transformation update, will include an update from Mr. Tommy Smeagol, who is the principal of the Academy for Discovery at Lakewood. He will provide an update as to the application status process, the wait list, and proposed demographics, and some other pertinent facts as it relates to our planning and transition towards the opening of the Academy for Discovery at Lakewood. The second item under that agenda 2.01 will be an educational planning update with Dr. Patricia Malisi coordinating, as well as Tracy Richter is here, Richter, DeYoung and Richter, to provide an update, particularly as it relates to the planned or the potential transformation of the Ocean View Willoughby schools to reconfigure those grades. So with that being said, Mr. Smeagol.
Give you an exciting update about ADL, the Academy for Discovery at Lakewood. We call it ADL or Lakewood. And Dr. Houston, I got your warning about time. This time I was given an actual time limit, so I'll make sure I stick to it. But thanks. So we are here today to give you an update and just to use some of the same imagery from the first two presentations that I gave to you. We talked about an implementation plan, which is kind of a milestone plan, and we're going to follow that timeline, that milestone plan today, and give you updates under each one. So under that implementation plan, you'll see phase 1 was the building evaluation, and you'll see in red completed. Phase 2 was the formation of the SPMT, and you'll see that that's completed. Phase 3, a new and innovative idea, were completed there. Phase 4, academy, academic program, and student entrance criteria finalization, once again completed. Phase 5, student application released, that's completed. Phase 6, all these completeds are a good thing, right? Phase 6, student selection process has been completed. Phase 7, the hiring of staff, that is in progress. And then Phase 8, which is staff professional development, will happen. We're working on this now, and it will happen this summer. So let's start with more details with Phase 1 and the building evaluation. As you probably remember, in September of 2014, I did a walkthrough of the building with staff, and we identified critical needs. And you'll see the listing here, and just to go through some of those, the building had not been painted in about 20 years, and so it was needing to be painted to give it a fresh look. And so that has been completed. Actually, the painters packed up last week. Have moved on to their next project. They were grateful because painters in the system usually work at night, in the evening, and they got to work during the day through this whole process. So they're kind of sad to be leaving the school. Removal of old materials and clutter. We have removed quite a bit out of the building to make openings for the new staff and the new material that will be coming in. But the bigger things are the furniture, which was budgeted for and approved, and we've ordered it. It will be arriving in mid-May. We've been working with Contracts, the furniture company. They've been in and out of the building, how they're going to move the furniture in, but they actually do all the setup as part of the contract. So none of our staff has to be involved in any of that. The furniture comes in trucks. They start unloading and they put them in the classrooms, and it's pretty neat to watch the process because they actually have 3D images of each of the classrooms and know exactly where the furniture gets put in each of the rooms, and of course we'll help move some things as we get going with it. Technology is in progress right now, and I have to give a shout out to Andrew Sikora and her folks who have just been phenomenal with working with me and making sure that our building is up to par like all the other schools in the district. and we are finalizing what needs to be ordered in order to make that happen. And then classroom supplies and textbooks, that is also in progress. As you know, the building was not an elementary school, so we did not have any materials for 3rd through 5th grade. And a lot of the materials left the building to go with the students that were moved to the other middle schools. And so we are in the process of finalizing that and identifying the needs to make sure that we open up just like any other school would with the materials that are needed. Through all of this, I also have to give a shout out to Dr. Thornton, who has been phenomenal with this whole transition and process. He has shown up to the building. He answers his phone when I call, and he asks questions and asks more questions. So I appreciate his support and the staff that has been working with this to make it happen. Thank you. Facility maintenance and repair, we do have some minor things that are in progress, and as you know, sometimes things come up, such as parent complaints. We already had a parent who sent you guys an email complaining about some items on the outside, and Rex Gay, once again, has been phenomenal in responding to this and addressing those issues, some safety issues, and it's being taken care of. So at this point, we are on track of having everything completed early and not worrying about something that's going to be done the week before school starts. So we appreciate everybody working as hard as they can to make this happen. Phase 2, the formation of the SPMT, we've been meeting. I gave them a break. We met probably about 7 times in March and April because of the IB application deadline. So I told them I would give them most of April off, and that we would reconvene for one more meeting in May just to finalize a few things. The SPMT will be transitioning to an internal stakeholder committee with external folks still staying on it, some parents and community members, but it will become more of teachers, students, and staff working on now the planning part of it. So our last meeting will be in May, and we will thank everybody who has been helping us with this. I do want to say Dr. Bob Spina, who's been chairing the SPMT, professor at Old Dominion University and dean, will be leaving the area. He has taken a dean's position in Texas for an education department. But he's been very excited about what we've been doing here and wants to continue following what we're doing and maybe use it as a model where he's going. So phase 3, which was actually a very exciting thing for our school, was how we started articulating the new and innovative identity. Now, early on, we gave you program descriptions, but now we get to see the action with that by having a mission and philosophy statement that was written. The committee spent a lot of time on this, working to write this, and it was actually part of the process for applying for the International Baccalaureate program. You had to have your mission statement and philosophy aligned to their mission and philosophy. So as you read this, you'll see a lot of words in there that are right out of the IB philosophy and mission, but a little bit more personalized for us. I do want to read the mission statement out loud for you. I know it's in front of you. I won't read the philosophy, just so that you can hear how it sounds. In partnership with students, families, and community, the Academy for Discovery at Lakewood will inspire in its students a lifelong passion for learning in a global society. With a commitment to academic excellence and personal integrity, students will demonstrate independent and reflective thinking, creativity, as well as a sense of social responsibility and intercultural understanding. One day I will have that memorized, and when you're at the school visiting, you can ask me to say that. I'm still memorizing it, as I've done at every school that I've worked at. But it is a powerful statement if you read what's in there, and then you can look how we wrote our philosophies actually after Eagles, and the committee had a lot of fun picking the phrases that would go along with that and meeting the IB requirements. Phase 4, our academic program and student entrance criteria finalization. As I said previously, the areas of focus were project-based learning and the International Baccalaureate program. So there have been some questions from staff members about where did PBL come from, because the school was always called the NPS STEM pre-IB school, and as we went through a process, we decided that STEM should not be the focus, but actually the International Baccalaureate program should be the focus, and something called project-based learning. As we started doing our research, if you recall, we found that that was an innovative way to teach that kind of goes along the lines of STEM education as well as the International Baccalaureate. It's also kind of a backup plan. We feel confident that we'll be a candidate school with the International Baccalaureate program, but if not, we can still move forward with project-based learning for all students in the school. We did complete the IB application, and it was submitted by the deadline of April 1st. The district did pay the $4,000 candidate application fee. I made sure that that check was one day mailed and in somebody's hands. I called them 3 times the next day to make sure they had it, because I didn't want any questions about that check. We are now just in the process of waiting for a response. Generally, that $4,000 pays for a consultant firm to look at the application and then give feedback to the school as we move forward. So hopefully in the next month we will receive a letter from them that will give us feedback on what we need to update in the application, if they're requesting further information, which they may, because when you're submitting the application, I didn't have staff members, so I couldn't tell them who the staff members were that were teaching, but they were okay with that. They just asked that as we get that information that we provide it to them. And we're working on that. We'll work on it when we get the response from them. The SPMT was fully involved in reviewing the application, helping me edit it, catching any errors, and then I spent about 7 hours on a computer just typing it all in. And it was a great process for me also to help me with understanding my school when it opens in September. Phase 5, student application was released. So the purpose of this slide is to show you how much outreach that we did. We wanted to make sure that we had a diverse applicant pool for the school. So in order to do that, we made sure that it was advertised everywhere. Every rising 3rd through 8th grader received a letter in the mail letting them know that the application had been released and about the school. Of course, there may have been letters that were returned because of bad addresses, so that's why we did EduLink calls. Along with the school naming process, there was additional EduLink calls. We also did 3 open houses. We had over 1,000 participants come to 3 open houses, including an additional middle school night that we extended the deadline for middle school applications, and we had a phenomenal turnout at that event as well. We had the newspaper article that was published about the new school, and of course we've been using social media to help advertise the school. And you'll see later what the response was for this. Phase 6, the student selection process. So the deadline for 3rd through 5th grade was February 13th. In fact, that was the original deadline for middle school as well. We did end up extending the middle school program because all the specialty programs had to extend their deadline because of the snow. As well as for us, it was good that we did that because we weren't receiving as many applications at the 7th and 8th grade level, and so we wanted to give an extra push for that, and that's why we did the middle school night. Students were selected through a number lottery, and every applicant actually received a number. They were put on a spreadsheet alphabetically, and they received a number. So if you were a 3rd grade applicant and you were the first one on there, your number was 3001. And then the next student would be 3002. So the numbers actually were put in cups and then pulled out, and then they went back to the spreadsheet and matched up who that student was, and then they would get a letter saying that they were invited to the school. One of the things that I think is important to point out is it wasn't a true lottery system because we had a sibling policy. So if a sibling got in, then another, their sibling was able to get in. That is not going to be the practice of the school from this point forward. It was to fill the school initially. And I can tell you that when we didn't have the sibling policy initially, we were not seeing the applications coming in. But when we started announcing the sibling policy, they started pouring in. Parents really wanted to keep their students together, and I think it makes sense when you have a rising 6th grader coming in from an elementary school, they wanted their sibling to come with them. And then you also had parents that wanted to take advantage of locking in a middle school now, a program now in elementary. So if you got those applications for siblings, they knew they had a better chance of getting in. So, that's been a hard thing to explain to parents, especially those that have a single child. But there has been plenty of opportunity for students to get in. I expanded my enrollment to allow more students to come in the first year, even though Tracy said don't do that. But we wanted to make sure that we were giving as many kids as possible an opportunity to come in. There was also, just to let you know, some parents did not understand that it was a lottery process. And when they got the letter that said that their child did not get in, we received angry phone calls. Sometimes it would say, my child has straight A's. I don't understand why they couldn't get into your school. They should have gotten to your school. And then when you remind about lottery, they said, well, I didn't know it was a lottery process. It's on every piece of documentation that went out to the parents, but I can understand their frustration, if you wanted your child to get into the school. The lottery process did take 7 days to complete because of the sibling policy. So we started with 8th grade and then worked our way down from that. And every time we pulled a name, we had to find their sibling and then make sure that their application was put to the side. So as we went through, that we didn't over-pull on numbers. So to give you some of the response from the applications, we had 236 applications turned in for 3rd grade, and for 6th grade, 386 applications. Those numbers do not reflect the late applications that came in after the deadline because we still had parents turning them in. So the bottom number shows you that we had a total of 1,156 applications for the school. There were 101 applications that were received after the deadline. So we had a total of 1,257 applications for the school. 700 students approximately were accepted, so we have over 550 students on the waiting list. So if you received any phone calls or complaints, that's almost a whole school that didn't get accepted to come to the school. And there are upset parents, but this tells me and you that we need more programs for our parents. They want this, they're desiring it. And I know we're going to be working with Tracy once we finalize student ID numbers so that he can actually see where the applications were coming from, and he'll find that they're coming from all around the city. Phase 6 continues with the student selection process. So just to let you know, we did mail acceptance letters and commitment form had to be returned. For each grade level, we actually received a 95% or higher commitment rate. So once those parents got those letters, they actually returned them and signed to say they wanted to come to the school. And we had a few that said that they changed their mind and they didn't want to come. So we went to a second round lottery, but there was very few slots at the second round lottery. In fact, 5th grade, we only were able to pull 2 more students at the 5th grade level. So there were parents that they've been asking about, where is my child on the waiting list? We do not do a waiting list number. We felt like that may set parents up for more disappointment if they knew they were number 10 in a school that is very locked with a cap enrollment. That student may never get in, but they may think that they're eventually going to get in. So we didn't want to do that, so we just keep the numbers in the cups, and as we get an opening, we just pull out a number, and we'll continue doing that through the year. We received a very diverse pool of applicants that came in, and our students that actually are coming from Title I schools, grades 3 through 5, 75% of the applications came from Title I schools. But another phenomenal number, too, was the amount of applicants that we had from students that are not currently in NPS and are coming from private or homeschool environment. I spent a lot of time talking to these parents, hours giving them tours of the meeting, of the building, and letting them know that this was a good program for them to send their students. And when it was all said and done through the lottery, we had 49 grade 3 through 5 students selected and 32 grades 6 through 8. That process, the information about the school is still getting out to the private homeschool community, so we're still getting requests now. And a lot of the private homeschool parents have said, well, we didn't know about the school. If we had known about it, we would have applied. So once again, it tells us that we need more programming in our city to invite that. I do have a quick story. One of the private schools that I think is being impacted the most has responded and reacted to this and is actually implementing a STEM program at their school next year. in an attempt to maybe salvage some of the students. So it's been interesting to watch that process. But we're excited. This is more ADM for the school district. It's also helping build up our reputation, and we're going to impress these parents so that they stay. We will be doing a separate private and homeschool parent open house as part of this transition for that, and you would be invited to attend. I'll make sure that you have that if any of you would like to come to that date. So far, we just got some demographic information on the students. Total student enrollment is 49% female, 51% male. The race breakdown is 43% black, 42% white, 7% multiracial, 4% Asian Pacific Islander, 3% Hispanic, and 1% other. These numbers will fluctuate a little bit more because we did send out the second round of letters, and we're waiting for commitment letters to come back. So we're about 30 students shy of hitting our 700 mark. Our free and reduced lunch numbers will be calculated once we get all of our student commitment forms calculated in, and then we will send those ID numbers to Helen Phillips to help us get that number. But that was not asked for on any of the applications that went out, so we don't know the students what their free and reduced lunch status is. Phase 7, the hiring of the staff. I had the fortunate pleasure of having 160 teachers on the transfer list to come to the school that wanted to work at the school. I've been interviewing. At this point, I've just surpassed 75 interviews. This is good for a new principal to get this experience. It's been great to talk to the teachers and get feedback from them and hear their excitement about the school as well. And many of the teachers have been very gracious and said, well, even if I'm not picked as a teacher for this building, I want to really follow what you're doing, because reading the literature about project-based learning and IB has energized me to want to put those types of activities in my classroom. And so it's been great to hear the feedback from them. I have sent recommendations so far, the human resources, of 80% of the available positions right now. And of course, many of this is on hold as we're going through budget process and waiting for official allocations. But I've let them know, teachers, that I've invited to come to the school and work next year. Phase 8 is the staff professional development. We have identified our needs, and we are going to be working with Dr. Lisa Corbin and Lauren Campson to make sure that we identify funding sources to pay for a 3-day PBL training and a 1-day IB introductory training, which is required by the IB program. And then we will continue working with Dr. Thornton on the ongoing IB required training. We did have to submit a 5-year budget proposal for IB to show that we were committed to funding professional development for the staff. So that was a mouthful. I'll try to answer any questions for you that you may have right now.
Well, first of all, thank you for a very informative presentation. And this is really, really exciting for the district, and I think a good model for the development and expansion of other programs. And I'm excited not only to see this school really get up and running and providing this high-quality education to our children, but really looking forward to the time when we'll be able to duplicate the same, through the same level of quality throughout the district. Thank you for your leadership in this. Yes. Dr. Stewart?
Some anecdotes. In the process of becoming, many people who had children in private school and some who had homeschoolers approached me. They didn't know about you. I told them first you were an excellent teacher who decided to be an administrator and had a lot of experience. That was helpful. I haven't heard whether they were lucky enough for the draw.
Sure.
I'm sure if they weren't, they'll let me know, and if they are, they'll let me know.
Sure.
But as I reimagined Norfolk Public Schools several years ago, this is important. I know that we developed as part of our mission statement, the cornerstone, Norfolk Public Schools, a cornerstone of a proudly diverse community. And I believe that this is the cornerstone of the cornerstone, and I've said that. In saying that, that means it has to spread. So what's going on here, you have to help spread all around the system.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if I may just ask a practical question, this year, we've been very good about funding the school, so it's up and ready to go, 100% on all engines. And I noticed in our budget book for next year, there wasn't necessarily a sheet set aside yet for this school in terms of what allocations were going to be distributed for the school. Premature, I know, at the time of when the book was put together. But is the school far enough along now that we are going to appropriately budget for next year so that it continues to be successful? Because again, we just don't want the year 0 to be successful. We want year 1, 2, and 3 to be successful too, and not shortchange anything after
Yes.
you quote-unquote launch.
Yes, we will, now that we have some solid numbers, we'll be able to calculate the school-based allocation based on that per pupil amount. That's pretty standard across elementary and middle schools. So once that's done, the final budget document should reflect that.
And will there be an increase in our budget that we're going to see from you as you modify that over time?
No.
Or was that is kind
For
of
next year?
Mhm.
No, should not be. It'll be, we'll take it from what's embedded in the base budget now.
Okay.
Because we did not eliminate the funding that was there for the previous middle school.
Okay.
And I know that most of the expenses that we've had this year are one-time expenses, but the ongoing, Dr. Thornton has said, you know, we'll just keep them updated, and Dr. Charbonnet has been wonderful as well in keeping that information, you know, forward. It's interesting as you go through this process, you find things that you didn't expect as you go through, and what the building didn't have to support a program, and everybody's been just very supportive of making sure that we do this right.
Yeah, I would agree. We just want to make sure that the budget's there for it to be successful.
Absolutely. It will be.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Noah?
What Ms. Doyle is saying with regards to making sure that the dollars are where the program is in order to make it a phenomenal program, because we have several programs right now that are on the cusp of really being launched. We have the pre-K to grades 2, and then the 3 through 5. We have other programs that I know that Mr. Richter is going to discuss as far as model concepts on different parts of the city. But the way that I look at the Academy of Discovery is that it could be potentially considered a best practice model. Here you had a school that was not doing very well. We looked to the expertise of an outside group who came in, looked at our numbers. They suggested to close the school down. Not every school, I understand, has this luxury, especially a school that I always keep in the back of my mind is Campostella. They don't have the luxury to shut down and restart again. But Lakewood was able to do that. They were able to come in and identify all of these things that they wanted to do in order to begin this phenomenal program. So I would want for us to make sure that our budget is in alignment with continued professional development, continued resources needed to keep the school on par with the technology needs, because not only do we want to attract these students from other facilities and maybe from home schools, private schools, but perhaps students from other cities whose parents work in Norfolk, but we want to retain families here. So I think that this school, under the leadership of Mr. Smeagol, could be a best practice. And we could really get the ball going. And then that way we can use this to help other schools that are in the works, Campostella, Broad Creek, Larchmont, and make sure that they continue to be successful as well. So I know that you submitted a budget to IB for your ongoing professional development. I know that from the SPMT meetings and from the research that you've given us with PBL, there's ongoing training for PBL. So I want us as a board to make sure that we're getting that information so that we can consider it in our budget.
Great, thank
The
you.
other thing I think is important when we talk about this is the best practice. It's similar to neighborhood revitalization. When neighborhood is revitalized and each of the residents get vouchers, and so tracking to see how well those that were, relocated, how well did they do. So there was a group of kids in that school. When we say the school wasn't doing well, that means kids weren't doing well, and those are individual students. So, how do we make sure that as they, move to different schools, that they are just as successful as the kids that are reconstituted in the school? Because in a sense, it's not a best practice if the kids who were there not doing well at some point. Now, that's not
Right.
your responsibility. Obviously, you're responsible for that school. But there are some kids that would not return to that school that weren't doing well when they were there. So I don't, mean to interject something negative in a very positive presentation, but I think we have to consider that fact, again, especially when we use the word best practice, that we want to make sure those kids who were moved out of the middle schools, that somehow or another they are getting the attention that's necessary so that they continue to be successful, or at least become successful also. Brad?
Question. Do you anticipate having parent-student compacts as part of the
Absolutely.
school process?
Actually, they've already, as part of the application process, they have to sign an initial one. We'll make some updates to it and then send them back out. But there was a compact that they had to initially sign, and the student had to sign it as well. And it's fun to watch a third grader sign the compact.
And your time frame for your open house?
We will be doing the private homeschool one is June 10th, but there will be grade level open house nights in June, which will be the first time that the students will get to see the furniture in the building and take a tour of the building. So we've limited touring because the building's been kind of going under some renovation. So that will be the time period that they can come in, and it's by grade level. And then the staff, hopefully, if it's official by then, will come that night as well for each grade level. They won't know who their teacher would be at that point, but they would have an idea of who it would be.
Thank you, because I was asked by a community member.
Okay.
So one, I'm excited. I think it's another example of if we provide choice and quality and meet the needs of parents, that we can show demand. And in that regard, I think that the folks that applied and didn't get in, that we would try to support the administration with being able to have the resources to really do a good data mining of that. As Dr. Gabriel said earlier, we know we're going to have other choice seats in other places, and being able to have a good understanding of what they were seeking. Was it project-based learning? Was it some other factors? Does it matter if it's in the center of the city or a different part of the city? We're really trying to get a handle on that. Along those lines, I think having that social economic data is going to be critically important to make sure that that we're sticking with our goals of trying to make sure that we have economic diversity. And then also on those lines, trying to make sure that as we pull from other schools, what the potential impact is on the schools that are providing students to this school. If we want to be careful if we're creaming in any particular case, and try to make sure that we're aware of that. On the staffing side, we've talked a lot about challenges that we've had at our hard-to-staff schools. So I also think that it's important, as part of that data collection, that we can get a sense of whether or not we are pulling our most highly effective staff persons from other schools and then unintentionally having consequences there. So I think it's important that we track that. And on the transportation side, we're providing transportation.
Right. Anybody outside a mile of the district.
So
of the school, around the school.
So, because I know at one point there was a conversation about some type of hub and spoke process. What did we end up deciding there?
At this point in time, we have not determined that we would utilize that. We would go with the traditional, pick them up at designated bus stops within the communities that they're coming out of.
Yeah, so I think it would be good for us at some point next year to just have an understanding of that cost. So as we talk about budgets and other things and opportunities at other schools, we have an idea of what that is. And and the last thing, just going back to the conversation around budget and costs and expenses, I agree that I think it's important that we support this school moving forward, but also think it's important that we don't lose sight of all the other schools. You know, and the policy committee we'll talk about a little bit later around the work that we hope to be able to present to the board before this school year is up around an equity framework. And so I think it's important that we keep that in mind as we, one, continue to talk with our city partners about the resources that we need to support success, and then two, make sure that as we resource our schools that we're keeping in mind our equity framework and don't find all resources go in one place and causing a burden someplace else. But I'm excited. I think it's great, and like Dr. Robinson said, look forward to the open house and really having a great year.
You did a great job recommending the school to lots of folks, so a lot of people threw your name out there trying to get in. I know Rodney Jordan.
Trying to get you a socially, economically diverse population.
And I appreciate that. And just to let you know, too, there's a lot of lessons learned from this process. And, you know, I've shared a lot of concerns and ideas with Dr. Thornton if this were to be done. And I'd love to help out the next person that has to go through this. The other thing, too, is the impact is big this year on most schools. But if you remember, next year, the entry points are only at 3rd and 6th grade. So after this year, we're only looking at maybe an impact of 100 students at 3rd grade and then 50 at 6th grade. And so to establish the whole school this year was a major impact. And I know my colleagues have made comments and, you know, are feeling the pain, but we have to establish the school and get it going and get the reputation out there, and then we'll go down, and then the next project will go forward. And I just also wanted to announce too, today I found out I won a $5,000 grant from Lowe's to do the rooftop garden and the outdoor learning environment. So I applied for that in February once I got the school name, and they emailed me today. So I'm trying to save money and add to the programming, Dr. Thornton.
That's great.
Yeah.
Brad and Courtney and Noel.
I too am excited about this. I just want us to begin thinking about the next program. We've already got the demand for one other school. It's already there. And once we see the wonderful program that's going to be at Lakewood, that's going to create more demand. And we want to be ahead of the curve. We want to go where the puck's going, not where it is. So I'm really excited about that. That's why the transportation model is really going to be critical, is the hub and spoke. As we have more choice schools, we're going to have to be very creative in our transportation model. So for cost effectiveness and for moving children from one side of the city to the other. So it's we got to keep our minds looking forward. So a good job.
So, can you just remind us and the community how the accreditation status will be awarded to the school? Will it be based on the students there or based on where they came from, et cetera? So if you could elaborate.
Sure. We are a school, so we have a state testing number that has already been assigned to us. In fact, we had to put that in the documentation for the IB application, so the scores do stay at the school. And it's, from what I know, the first 3 years the school is provisionally accredited regardless of what happens with our results, because all data in Virginia is based off of a 3-year average, and we don't have a 3-year average, so they can't penalize you on that, which is actually good as we're putting project-based learning in. It allows us the opportunity to see what's working and what's not working as we progress with that. So, but it is a 3-year provisional accreditation regardless of what the results are. But we'll be fully accredited the first year, so that's fine. So,
Move on.
Because you're the numbers person, 81 new students, what kind of dollar amount does that translate to Norfolk Public Schools?
What you might ask me. It's about $5,000 a student, so roughly about $400,000
and then if they stay, then
through the ADM.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look forward
Thank
to
you,
coming back, giving you another update this summer. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Next, again, educational planning update. The potential grade reconfiguration of Ocean View Elementary School and Willoughby Elementary School. Mr. Tracy Richter of DeYoung Richter, and Dr. Pat Malisi, Executive Director of Elementary Schools, supporting both Willoughby and Ocean View. And they are here this afternoon to share with you an update on those planning efforts. And we have a very brief presentation for you, and then the majority of time would be allotted for questions from the board.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman Houston, Mr. Doyle, School Board, Dr. Thornton. First of all, I want to thank everyone that has so diligently worked on this project so far, and so we have, like Dr. Thornton said, a very short presentation for you about where we are and where we're going with this, hopefully. Okay, so just a brief history, a reminder, a refresher that in 2013-14 school year, Norfolk Public Schools entered into a partnership with the City of Norfolk to construct a new Ocean View. And in March of 2014, the school board approved that Willoughby and Ocean View attendance zones would be consolidated, with Ocean View being a K through 5 school and Willoughby serving pre-K as a pre-K center. In December of 2014, the VDOE announced pre-K expansion and provided 10 new pre-K classrooms in Norfolk that will start next year as well. And then in December through March of this year, as part of an ongoing study, it was suggested that, by the steering committee, that we take a preliminary step, a phase 1, so to speak, on the consolidation by moving Ocean View pre-kindergarten classes to Willoughby and moving Willoughby's 3rd through 5th grades to Ocean View. On April 15th, last month, you all gave permission to DeYoung Richter to solicit further community feedback. And we did meet last night and many times, and Tracy will go over that and go over that feedback with you. But something that might just clarify for you the proposal. That is that next year in the 2015-16 school year, you can see the grade levels. Ocean View would be K5, Willoughby would be pre-K2. The following year, 2016-17, same thing. And then with the completion of the new Ocean View school in 2017-18, Ocean View would remain K5, but Willoughby would then just become a pre-K center. You want me to work this?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
So just some of the numbers to back up the supporting documentation. You know, when you look at the implementation of this, the Willoughby enrollment, as we know, has a pretty steady decline when they get in the 5th grade class, and so the concern over amount of resources, the ability to team teachers together, all that component of programming really kind of drove some decision making here to provide the best opportunity for students when they walk in a building. With the projected enrollment, we think that, once again, there's some concern out there about overcrowding schools, bigger class sizes, but we don't feel like this is the case at all. And you're going to see here that, you know, with the projected enrollment, we have strong class sizes now in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in the Ocean View in this recommendation. But here's one of the key components, and, you know, the thing that may confuse some people, but we've kind of been well-versed in this live-in number. How many kids live in a boundary? And when you look at the numbers and the supporting, one of the foundations of planning is the idea that a population of boundary can support a building within that. So if we have too few kids to not fill a building, we have concerns. If we have too many kids in a boundary to overutilize the building, we have concerns. And that's the foundation of decision making then. Well, we see here the Willoughby in its current boundary, 106 K5 kids live in that. 106. We have a building that can hold up to 430 students. And so even if we told everybody to go back to their home school, and we won't do that, but we don't have enough kids to fill a building anymore. And this is pretty much across the top of the district, you know, as you look at those buildings and utilization. And part of the further study will address those things. Whereas Ocean View, we're at a good, healthy number, 500. And when you add that in with the new building, the anticipated live-in of a 700 capacity will be 600 students, which allows for choice to come in if we need it to, for some growth that may occur or may not occur. Depends on a lot of the Navy influence there. And so we feel like we've done a really good plan of flexibility in the future. And so, and provide a huge opportunity of services in the north part of the district. So as we look at this, this is the enrollment grade shifts, and this is, again, projected numbers. You never know who's going to show up and who doesn't show up sometimes. But our projected numbers, where four of the pre-K classes will move over to Willoughby out of Ocean View, that's 72 students, 18, all those classes are full. We all know there's waiting lists up there for pre-K seats. And so all 4 of those classes will move over to Willoughby, and then 58 students, approximately 58 students in the projected enrollment will then move over to Ocean View. Now, this means that we're going to decrease the utilization a little bit at Ocean View, which is great news because it's at 100%. So we're going to reduce that a little bit, and it's projected enrollment to be 572 in a 608 student station school. So we're allowing a little bit of room, breathing room, for the last 2 years they're in the building. And then we're going to increase that enrollment for 228 at Willoughby. So it increases the utilization some. So we get it just above that 50% mark, which we're better than we were before. So those are all the number data support a good move and then support the program data, which is, was this me too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Carry on.
So as we increase the learning opportunities for more students, and this is something that we continue to try to educate and drive home, that we understand that it's not just a numbers game. We're dealing with students, we're dealing with the lives of families. Our opportunity here is to assure that a 5th grade teacher has a team to work with of 5th grade teachers who support the diverse needs of the community that they're going to serve. And so we see that opportunity occurring here. And it will be 3 or 4 teachers, depends on the numbers that come in and the funding numbers that come in. So that collaborative learning environment, that Ocean View, and again, both fantastic schools. I want to just keep reiterating that the staffs and the leadership at both schools are conducive to good learning. And so, and we also see that this will be a gradual transition. In 2 years, this building is we're going to make the shift to an entire pre-K building and then a K-5. The transition for that to happen, instead of picking up 220 kids and just moving them overnight, the transition will happen that we allow this to be acclimated into the Ocean View, kind of that culture, and to blend the cultures of Willoughby and Ocean View over time. Proven successful model over, I don't know, hundreds of districts across the country, and so we want to make sure this happens. Understanding that there are concerns in the transition, that families are going to be uncomfortable in that start. The principals have made assurances that they will meet one-on-one. The principal at Ocean View is giving school tours today for Willoughby parents already to assure them that there are good things happening, that they'll take care of all the needs, whether it's a military child, a special needs child, whatever the need will be, that Ocean View can serve that need. And so that is moving forward. And so you do have that award winning, and then we do really want to, one of the big topics of discussion last night was that military presence, understanding that those children go through many transitions in their lives. And so trying to stabilize good environments for them and learning environments that they can learn in but feel like it's their home is important to us. And so we want to make sure that, and it comes from the top down, all the way from superintendent and school board meetings, members being present at that meeting to show the interest and show the concern that we have over transition for children, and the leadership in those buildings supporting that. And all the way down to the teacher. We had one teacher finalize our conversation last night who stated, I've been here 32 years. Change is going to be a little hard, but she is gung-ho for it. She's excited to see new children in her building from Willoughby, and really ready to make this move forward. So once again, everything that supports the numbers, and then on the transition side, that plan moving forward here.
Okay, and just up there you'll see the dates of the stakeholder input that has already taken place for this transition. I don't have to read those dates to you. If you have questions about those dates later, you can have them. And then Tracy's going to go over a little bit of the input that we heard, both online survey last evening and throughout discussions.
So the anticipated academic benefits are always up front, and we're going to continue to stress those. But the understanding that this part of the city has been in need of pre-kindergarten services. Dr. Gabriel, one thing you've talked about from the beginning when we walked in the door, pay attention to this pre-K need in our city. And it became a priority in our discussion, and it has been. We know the early intervention is important, and we're going to serve 3- and 4-year-olds to a number that we've never been able to serve in the north part of this division, and that's exciting. And get rid of that waiting list, get kids in the door. That's what we want. The concern about the change of the current successful schools, and I think that a brand new building, you think is always exciting and everything's positive about, but there's always challenges. There's always that next question as you walk into this fantastic tradition school that is Ocean View, and you see those beautiful auditorium seats and everything like that. But knowing that what they're going to walk into is a modern day educational environment that will serve the needs, that has the space types, the technology, everything that the student will need to succeed. That's what we want to put forward. And understanding that Willoughby is still there as a school, as an educational presence in this neighborhood that has been a concern in the community for a long time, that, we're just going to close that building. No, we're not going to just close that building. The desire to keep the exceptionally small class sizes, I kind of get it. I'm a teacher. When I taught 16 in my classroom, it was a beautiful day sometimes. But I could do 26, 27 all day long, and you're not even doing that here. The Ocean View class sizes will remain relatively small, 19 to 21 across the board. Personalized instruction that exists at Ocean View today. And so we're not going to have 8, but the discussion last night was about the equity of 8 in a classroom versus 20 when dollars are allocated at a division level and trying to figure out how we do that best. That's equitable to all students. And that's not to take away from what's happening at Willoughby, because it's they're doing wonderful things. We just want to make sure that they're staffed with the right resources. We talked about reading specialists, we talk about social works, we talk about all those that one school can't afford because there's not enough dollars walking in that door. And we said last night, we don't want our instructors behind a windshield driving back and forth. We don't want that. We want them in the classrooms, we want them in the media centers, we want them in the administration offices. That's where we need them. And so we think that will benefit there. And so the class size thing was a concern that we heard. Logistics such as transportation, it's a challenge to drive there at 3:30 in the afternoon, and we understand that. So we have to look at things like schedules, and we have to look at things like some infrastructure investment into that area when capital dollars become available to do that. And so understanding that, knowing that parents are going to have not many, but some are going to have a child at Willoughby and Ocean View. And so working with that transition, making sure that, Bob Klein is working with us closely to make sure that we're going to make that happen as effectively as possible.
Just stagger times or classroom moves?
I'm sorry?
Stagger times.
The stagger times, and I think that'll be part of it. I think that's some work to do through this is the stagger start and stop times, and when pre-K will be dismissed versus all that. Again, a very common practice around this country to stagger for a lot of different reasons, whether it's grade configuration, whether it's, I make the personal example that we have 6 schools on 3 sites in my own home district, and each of those sites are a 10 to 15 minute departure and arrival time. Works effectively. My daughter actually goes through that. She goes by one school and then goes by that school again in the afternoon. And so we work with that, we're familiar with it, but we want to make sure that, I think the important piece of stagger times is making sure that it's communicated well to the community and to the stakeholder and to the parents and the children of those schools. So there's no confusion over it. We're going to start here, we're going to end here. And that way we're going to relieve some traffic patterns, we're going to relieve some of that stress of my child's not waiting at the school for very long or at all, if we can help it. And so there's still a lot of logistics planning to do there, but I'm confident that we have the talent sitting around the table to do that. Still me, or is it you?
Yeah, well, you can just.
Okay. So we have, like I said, we have the talent sitting around the table to do this. School leadership, district leadership, from all departments, making sure that that everybody is involved with this. Site visits are being conducted, as I said earlier, even today, site visits are being conducted. Making sure that, and it's going to have to work both ways as the pre-K transition's over. Mrs. Lightfoot's going to have to work with that community come in and the pre-K community too. And so Excited about that leadership of doing that. Again, there's that stagger time, a review of placement of self-contained classrooms. I think that one of the questions last night was around the autistic center that's there. And, you know, the review of how special needs placement is ongoing, making sure that the service needs are met and as proximity as we can to our students, but offering the full spectrum at each building. That is important. And so there's some discussion to do, knowing that the grade stagger right now for the autistic unit is a K1 and then 2-3. And the 2-3 obviously would offer a challenge in this situation, and the K1 may not, or it may. So there has to be review, making sure the needs are met of those students. We do know that the out-of-district transfer in special needs is relatively high here. There's not a lot of in-district special needs here, and so we may be able to review an opportunity to put services closer to where people live, and we're going to take advantage of that opportunity if we can. Understanding that also that understanding that change is difficult, and we want to make sure those needs are met there. We are going to and are in the process now of putting together an FAQ sheet. We've got a lot of response online already for this and to some of the questions we had last night, but we want to make sure that, again, a continuous communication, a continuous education of this transition will be most important. Like anything, communication will be the key to what we do.
Tracy, Dr. Malisi,
All right, thank you. Again, I think this is transformation in action. You know, as you listen to Mr. Smeagol's presentation on Lakewood and here with the again, opportunity for growth and improvement and efficiency in education in these communities. And so I think it's an exciting time. And as you said, Tracy, change is always difficult, even when it's changed for the better. And it's our responsibility as leaders to kind of, you know, help negotiate that and navigate it and help people embrace and be comfortable with it for the betterment of all of our students. Questions or comments on this presentation? Yes, Dr. Stewart.
Comments. I missed the passion last night. I was there for the opening, and you did a great job in understanding the reasons, but I missed the passions, and I regret that. But I can tell you that I choose to hear high compliments of both Willoughby and Ocean View Elementaries coming from the mouths of those people involved. High compliments because they're happy with what's going on. The high possibilities are programming will be better for all students because of this improvement that's going on. Regarding transportation, I know every inch of all that territory. That's where my grandparents grew up. All of that area. And I know you think it's a driver and a pitching wedge between the two schools, but it's really 2 5-irons. Because I've lost a lot of golf balls out there. It's close. And eventually, what may end up happening is there may be a golf cart system 5 years from now when you have a wonderful pre-SCAFE center, just like the South Side has a wonderful there could be a lot of ways where resources, where teaching resources, speaker resources, there's any number of possibilities. And the only separates is a wonderful sand dune which nobody wants to get rid of. But I see great complements, I see great possibilities, and in helping with transportation, there are other routes from the housing development where these people live. It's called Phillips Street and Hickory Street. There are other ways for them to easily and conveniently get to Ocean View Elementary without going out around Fourth View and whatever. So it could be some education on transportation would be useful. I hear high compliments regarding both of those faculties, and good job.
Thank you. Yes, Deborah.
Logistically, with regards to the transportation, I saw that we're going to provide transportation for the 4-year-old pre-K students coming from Ocean View to Willoughby. Eventually, when it does become a full-fledged pre-K center, I know that we've talked about this before, what is our policy going to be as far as dropping the students off and transportation? Because if the parents are going to have to physically sign them in, we need to make sure that around Willoughby there is on-street parking, crossing guards for all the little children that they're going to be taking in there. So that's something that we can plan ahead since this is going to be in transition. Because eventually, as you stated, you want to have, you know, about 400 or so capacity at Willoughby, so it could potentially get that high. We have to account for that, plan ahead. especially during rainy days, flooding.
And we all did a walkthrough the other day of the facilities, both of them, and Rex Gay was with us. And we did say those exact words to him, that in 2 years' time, we need to look at accommodating 400-something children
Right.
at that one school.
Okay, great. That's what I said.
3-year-olds you're worried about.
Next year's
No,
5-year
no,
CIP.
no, it's,
That would be the
it's
time
gonna
for us
be-
to begin to put in some of the plans needed for the final conversion of the pre-K center.
Other questions or comments?
So we're having a conversation around clarifying the transportation pre-K4, pre-K3. So can you all just restate and clarify what it will look like come September?
The plan is that we will provide transportation for those pre-K 4-year-olds
Okay.
to Willoughby. Pre-K 3 will continue to be transported by their parents or whatever means they're receiving right now through their household. It's not the division's practice to transport pre-K 4-year-olds, but for those programs that we have recently implemented on our own initiative, we have offered pre-K 4 transportation in Berkeley because of some of the challenges there. So the plan is that we will provide transportation for pre-K 4 if the board approves this transition for next year.
But will that be ongoing?
The expectation is that once we start it, we would have to continue it. But as we expand, then we've got to have a larger conversation around pre-K 4 transportation as we go to the full center. Yes.
That's an expense that's gonna open up
Absolutely.
a can.
And once we start, you can't
Yeah.
get it back.
Because
So
we're not-
we've got to
we're not
have some
getting
serious
reimbursed.
conversation.
We're not getting reimbursed
No.
for our pre-K, so the city, the division is being very generous
Yes.
by offering this, and so,
Your turn to drive is on Tuesday.
I've got
we
5 car
definitely-
seats in my car already, but that's not gonna handle 400.
We will definitely,
My van is full.
we'll definitely need to have serious conversation about our ability to provide transportation for
Right.
pre-K, a pre-K center,
Right.
and what
Right.
that will mean for that end of town as well as any other areas that we may expand to centers. So in the immediate, the plan is to provide pre-K 4 transportation, but we have to have some long-term
Right, and
decisions.
I think that's a good discussion that we can have later.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear then. Come September, we're going to have how many pre-K 4 and how many pre-K 3?
At Willoughby?
At Willoughby.
Willoughby, we
Proposal.
will have 8.
8.
I believe it's 8. We will add 3 coming in from Ocean View. And
Pre-K
then we
4.
will have 2 additional going through the pre-K expansion grant that we received, for a total of 8
Well, we're adding.
currently.
We're adding 5, right?
4 and 2.
We're adding
That's
4.
what 4 and 2.
One
4
of those is
from
3.
Ocean View, 2 from DPI.
And there's currently 2.
And that's all pre-K 4?
One is a 3.
So there's one
One.
pre-K 3 class?
Right.
Okay, and that number is what, about 15? Is that what?
18, I believe.
18.
18.
And that's the group where the parents will have to drive?
That's right, the
Okay.
3-year-olds.
Okay.
Well, there are students with special needs, pre-K 3, and they get transportation. Special needs students with special needs get transportation, no matter what the age.
You're saying that's an additional class, or you're saying within that class, there are students?
That's the 3-year-old class.
The 3-year-old
Yeah,
class is
it's-
the class for
mhm.
students, okay. So they're all getting transportation, okay. The, I've been very appreciative of the support that the board has given to all of this ever since we first started talking about bringing in an education planning firm. We had the conversation around Campus Stella and K-5, K-8, and all of that. And so I know my commitment to this was as DeJean Richter gave it to us straight, that I would be locking arms with their recommendations that we know would have some tough decisions. So this is one of them. But having sat through that meeting last night, there are some things that I do believe we should consider as we move towards execution. The staffing piece, I know that you all are working on the staffing piece, some other budgeting pieces. There is a great staff at both schools, and I did sense a lot of apprehension, not so much just with the change and impact on two successful schools coming together, but also with the change in the configuration as it relates to having pre-K2 and no longer having pre-K through 5, and how many specialists do you have and how many of this do you have and so forth. So I think it would be very helpful if, I guess we're going to deal with this at a future meeting, to be able to get a good sense of what the impact is going to be on the staff there, and so that that can be clearly communicated and we're fully aware as we move down this path. But I think it's exciting. The other thing, early on in the presentation, you mentioned the vote that we took in March of 2014, and I was going back and looking at it, and at that time we had the larger transformation initiative, and then we scaled back. For example, we didn't do the pairing at Jaycox and Lindenwood, and then last month, Mr. Richter, you came back and gave us an additional model that you all will continue to plan for next year. So can you just speak for a moment, moving from this point, what we're looking at for next year, and then I think as a board that we be able to go back and look at that March 14th vote and make sure that we update wherever we are so that we don't find ourselves going back to 2014 with some approvals and then we made some modifications in between and we lose sight of exactly where we are. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, Mr. Jordan. And actually, I went back and reviewed that board doc today myself, just to, yeah, it's just because I think that here we are now in a continuous model of planning, which is something that, we got a little behind this year for a lot of different reasons, including Mother Nature. But, next year's update comes in October, November to make earlier decisions to help with transitions like this. But I think that, one of the comments last night I found intriguing from a parent was that you seem to have a lot of pieces going on. And the comment earlier about you talking about budget all relates to this. And when people hear that, I think they hear more money, more money. But that's not the case. We're driving towards efficiency while both offering great programs. And so we're aligning buildings to have appropriate capacities and appropriate enrollment for staffing, for programs, to allow those dollars to come back into play. We're offering programs such as Lakewood that brings $400,000 back into this division that will continue in a organized choice model. But it has to be, again, this idea that we took a school offline and had a year to plan it, was just the reason that we made the recommendation on the concept of taking 2 to 4 years to plan this next stage of, because we have the expertise of a dynamic principal to mentor us in this process now for the next transitions to happen. We do have to make modifications to the 2014, but as does any planning effort. And so we don't corner ourselves to make sure that we can't back out and then make a change. And we've talked since the beginning of having exit ramps. We're going to make an exit ramp here, exit ramp here. A continuous cycle of planning allows us to do that. Last night, one of the concerns was, I keep hearing about this carrier coming into some port someday, that what if that happens? Okay, well, what happens is that I still have 1,000 seats of educational presence in the Ocean View area because I didn't close down Willoughby. We work together to make sure educational presence stay there. We're always going to have 1,000 educational seats, regardless of age, grade, service need in the Ocean View area. What a great opportunity to have an exit ramp. And so we will review. We will look at those opportunities to say, what decisions did we make, and can we make the next adjustment to that, to not make it look so piecemeal. Because I think the first person walking in to look at this plan saying, wow, I've got a 3-8 school here, and now you're talking about pre-K here, but it's all part of a system now. It's all a strategic goal to get us to a fine neighborhood opportunity that we have in our own backyards. I can go to my school, and it's going to be the best school I can go to. Or I have the opportunity to choose a program that's of interest to my child. And it's systematically done. And so, but we're taking time to do it. There's no lightning in a bottle fix here. And this is a good example. Even though I believe that April decision is late, I completely agree with that teacher, but we believe we're taking the right steps to make sure the transition will happen appropriately.
Summer planning meeting is to pull out that document and compare what you originally voted for us to move forward on and show you what progress we've made. And then that'll set us up to prepare for the next year as we go through the planning and some of the milestones. So we can do that for the summer.
I spoke to that parent, one of the parents that was very vocal last night, and what I got from her was she was making a choice to bring her child. She was driving her child to Willoughby because she felt that Willoughby was offering the type of academic setting for her child to be successful that she didn't feel she was getting in her home district. And so to me, that parent making that choice is as valuable and as important to us as the parents who are making the choice to send their children to the Lakewood School. And so I just think it's important that, as you said earlier, that we be able to paint this big picture so that all the parents begin to understand these choice options and what's available in the process that you described. Because it is true, I think we've talked about it in pieces so much that it's hard for people to understand how it all fits together. And if some way for us to be able to really paint that picture going forward into the new year, I think would be very helpful.
Well, like we said in the last meeting, we really brought just 2 concepts to you this year because the dynamic is so great right now. And we want to make sure that we can get those breathers in there for the community when we can.
Okay, I have a question and comment first. I agree with Mr. Jordan that each parent is important, each child is important. And I think with our planning meeting that we're having at the end of May, that'll help us gain a bigger picture of what we're trying to do and then bring that out on a regular basis. So how each component fits in with that big picture, I think that will help those parents out because I can understand their consternation on not understanding the big picture because they don't see it all the time. So hopefully we can bear that out a little bit better in May. My question is, how many pre-K rooms are available, are going unused at Willoughby with this model? For next year or the year after?
You mean if this happens, or
Yes,
right now?
Right now. If we vote to do this, next year, we're going to have 8 pre-K classrooms there, is that what I'm understanding?
It's actually 8 pre-K4 and 1 pre-K3, right?
Yes.
Okay, so 9.
Yes.
So my question
And
is,
then
how many
there'll-
empty rooms?
And then there'll be a kindergarten, first grade, and second grade as well next
That's
year.
right, okay.
So there will be no empty.
There'll be no left, but once we do make the transition, then there'll be more.
In 2017,
In
then there'll be
2017,
more
once the new
room for
Ocean View
pre-K.
opens up, then there'll be more, so we can expand
Pre-K.
pre-K, okay. That answers my question.
Okay. And so there are a few more administrative matters and decisions that have to be made regarding the transition. I would like either just by simple consensus, if not, formal action, I think simple consensus is good, that we support the administration in moving forward with the plans and that we would be prepared to take formal action on the 20th. Are we all in agreement with that?
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Do we want to do it on the 20th, or we do meet next week on the 13th? Will we have information?
You mentioned that.
Will we have information by then, Dr. Thornton, that would then, if we decided then, would that help accelerate then the transition planning and/or communications, given the time of year?
I think so.
I just think it would be important that that's made known, because it is a special call meeting for a specific purpose, and if we're going to take action on something like this, it's just important that that be made known, that we're planning to do that.
And along those lines, we may want to be careful, because isn't it something else also that?
Evening of Excellence.
Evening of Excellence, so we just have to make sure we're prepared. The other thing with that is, just going back to what I was saying a moment ago, I think it's important to be able to have that staffing and other pieces to that as well, so that we are fully communicating what the impact is going to be.
So I would suggest that we, the board, consider taking the vote up on the 20th.
Okay.
That will give us 2 full weeks to ensure that we've got all of those questions answered. It will be done in a regular meeting, to your earlier point, that it won't appear as though it's being thrown in under some other type of meeting, because it is a sensitive matter. We want to make sure that we give the board the best possible information, and that the community understands clearly that we factored in all of the implications.
Dr. Robinson and Dr. Stewart. It would also, that's our practice anyway, to during the work session and then vote at the formal meeting. Plus, would also give the parents another opportunity to speak their minds during citizens' comments. So I think that's a wise idea for us to not move this forward. But with that said, I get the feeling there's a consensus of people that are supporting this, that let's go ahead and start with planning. Let's not wait till we vote for it. Let's get moving on this so that we can,
Yes.
A, have more information on the 20th, and next year's going to be here pretty fast. So 2 weeks is 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're here. Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Stewart.
For over 3 years, I've understood the importance of doing just this. For over 3 years, I've supported doing just this, and very excited, and believe that the energy that came out last night will certainly be as supportive of what's going to happen in order to help all students learn, in order to form a more perfect union of the Norfolk Public Schools.
Thank you. Yes.
And I also was there last night, and I was asking Mr. Richter this afternoon in terms of the number of families that are impacted by this change, and it's around 40 or so.
About that.
And given that small amount, I would just recommend to the division, to your point earlier, Mr. Jordan, that we sit down with each of those families, ask them what their concerns and needs are, and address how we can meet those needs. I mean, simply 40 families, which probably have multiple children anyway. So, you know, I think that would be a good opportunity for us to have good one-on-one communication with them and help address their needs, many of which were articulated last night. They
Sure.
weren't all there by any
Right.
means.
And that effort has started.
Yes, I've already made phone calls to the families that will have siblings, one at one school and one at the other.
Good.
And we had, I think there were about 11 families that I
Good.
called and talked to about, and they had a few questions, but they were very supportive
Good.
in general.
Yeah, I think that one-on-one outreach will go a very long way,
Mhm.
because this is a very good effort. Willoughby's a great school, Ocean View is a great school. They're going from a great to a great. They should be very happy about that, and then all of a sudden, in 2 years, there's a new school. So it's a win-win for everybody.
We'll make an attempt, but reality is they may have very different schedules trying to get
Sure.
them in. So we'll try to work with the principal, Ms. Lightfoot, to determine the best way to try to reach out, or at least give parents another opportunity to give us some feedback,
Sure.
even if it's not face-to-face.
Right.
But even if we expand the survey a little longer.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Trace, for good work you've been doing with the district. Okay, we are already behind, but we will continue. Item 2.02, academic affairs. Dr. Thornton?
All right, academic affairs, 2.02, progress monitoring update, expedited SOL retakes plan. Both of those will be presented and shared by Dr. Karen Bailey, followed by textbook adoption recommendations by Dr. Lisa Corbin. Dr. Bailey.
Ms. Campson would like to open. Dr. Houston, members of the board, Dr. Thornton. As part of the development of our new assessment system at the district level, this year for the first time at the elementary level, we administered a mock SOL test in early April. We'll be sharing the aggregate results of that with you today. Just a quick reminder that this is a diagnostic instrument that we give. It's been given by a number of our schools, each school developing their own in the past. This was the year that we managed to do one instrument for all of our schools to allow us to be able to pinpoint the areas that need the most help. So what the mock SOL test does, that Dr. Bailey will be sharing with you, is it gives us a checkpoint in early April of exactly where our children are. Which children are proficient, which children are non-proficient in the materials that they need to know to be successful at the end of the school year to be ready for the next year. And so we then have 5 weeks, and based on this test, each of our principals and their leadership teams developed a 5-week intervention plan. And that plan is in progress right now, being used, yes, to help prepare our children for the SOL test, but more importantly, to plug any deficiencies and skills that any of our children have to prepare them to be ready for their year next year. And that's really the most important reason that we give assessments. It also helps us to identify areas to improve for testing, but most importantly, it helps us make sure that all of our children have the skills that they need to move on to the next grade. And so what you're going to see with Dr. Bailey is a snapshot of where our students were a month ago, but not where they are now. Because with the interventions that we're offering both at the school level and because we did a district-wide test or assessment, also Dr. Corbin's instructional team was able to pinpoint where they most needed to go so that they were serving the schools and the children that most needed the most help. And so what you see should be not what you're going to see with the SOL test, because the whole point is to address the deficiencies that this test helps us to identify. And then I think we're going to share a few other things with the middle school data. And this time I'm going to turn it over to our data whiz, Dr. Bailey.
Well, I think that pretty much covers the presentation. But, but good afternoon, Dr. Houston, Dr. Thornton, members of the board. This is a very exciting time of the year where all of our students will be engaged in some form of assessment at the pre-K level all the way up to the 12th grade level. And we're very excited as we move forward. Certainly in June, we'll be looking at all of our student successes, and we'll be happy to share that with you. We do have a companion document. I hope you got a chance to look at that, the executive summary that gives you more detail by individual school level. So what we have here, as Ms. Campson mentioned, SOL formative assessments to inform our schools as to where our students are at that time. Basically, the interpretation of this proficient, needs improvement, did not meet for the red, yellow, and green. It is associated with our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. We do feel confident our students in the green section will be successful on the SOL tests. We also feel that students that fall into the yellow area will maybe most, or if not all, will pass the SOL test at this time. Our SOL middle school students, our middle school students took a second quarter benchmark assessment. Certainly we have reading and math at this time. We do not have our history and science because they're on a different timeline. They're on a 4x4. However, we did want to show you some information. They took their assessments back in February. Normally we would have had our post-assessments that would have occurred last week. But our teachers and our principals asked us to reschedule those to allow them more time to plan for the upcoming SOL assessments, as well as all of the other assessments that we have. We did not have any high school assessments because our high school students took their district benchmark assessment at the second quarter, which was the 1st of February. They also asked for the post-assessments that were scheduled last week to be rescheduled. We did comply with that and moved it to the first part of June. So therefore, they are planning for the numerous assessments that they have scheduled leading into this month and to the first part of next month. Here, I'm sharing with you about the SOL expedited retakes. I think you've heard a lot about this. This is just the timeline in which that information took place. Basically, it was proposed. They found maybe a little loophole to allow us to provide that opportunity for our students, and so the funding was available as well, and so here we are. We were not able to go back to any of our students that took SOLs in the fall of the year to retest them. So what does this mean for us? Basically, we have to get parental consent for students in grades 3 through 8 to retest the students at that time. If they have a scale score that falls between 375 and 399, then they become eligible to be remediated and then retake the test. And so we feel that this has tremendous impact on both of our two accountability systems, both the state accreditation accountability as well as the federal measurable objective accountability system. Okay. Just to
Can I just quickly ask you a question on that? Is there a reason why we wouldn't allow an expedited retake for a student that is tested below 375?
The state of Virginia feels that if a student scores below 375, that they might need more time to review the information that's covered on the assessment. And so it equates to number of items that may have been missed and so forth. And so, but they feel that that student may need more time to review the content that they may not have been successful in.
So are all divisions doing the cutoff at 375 like we are for expedited retake?
Yes.
Okay.
All districts are doing the same thing. And so here we have the high school schedule. You can see that we have a wealth of assessments occurring. We have some occurring this week into next week, our AP assessments as well as our career and technical education assessments. Our common formative post-assessments are scheduled for June, SAT sometime on Saturdays during this month. This is the breakdown. Once we get through the main testing, then SOL expedited is available. Our middle school schedule, and as you can see, we have put in for them the SOL expedited to occur June 8th through the 12th, giving them more time to get their regular testing done as well as the remediation. New for our middle schools this year is grade 6 math test. It's called computer adaptive testing, and it's slightly different from the SOL test. It'll be scored the same way. However, based on the first question, we'll determine the next sequence of questions that that student will get. So we'll be sharing more with you on that in the weekly. Then our elementary schools, we have broken it out for grades 2 through 5. Grade 2 does not take the SOL, however, they do take the post-assessment and the STAR reading and math. And then we have our pre-K to 1, which will take the PALS test. So that's all that we have at this time.
Questions or comments?
The use of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 on this chart, is that the same as when you all talk about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 students?
Yes.
So can you explain that to me again? Because I thought can you elaborate for me?
Okay.
So, because on this chart, this is saying that Tier 1 students are in the green, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought we also would say that Tier 1 students were the students that we thought were, most likely ahead of the curve or mastering standards?
Right. What you don't see here also is an extra category that would show certainly like students who are advanced and way above, which would be like 90% to 100%. So we have collapsed from 70% to 100 together. So yes, those students who are in the green section, we do feel confident that they will be successful on the SOL test. Some are ahead of the curve, and some are right where they need to be.
But what makes a student a Tier 1 student in this example is how they score on this test, or or the other assessments that you all have been doing earlier in the year?
Right now, it's based on how they've performed on this test. What our schools are doing is they're using our CFAs. As part of state recommendation 2, we do look at other multiple measures, such as grades, discipline, and attendance.
And
I think the misunderstanding might be that this doesn't just represent just Tier 1 students. This represents all students in the green who on the mock test scored at that percentage,
Right.
not just
That's
those students
that's
that
my
are
question.
designated tier one.
That in this particular case, this is saying that on this chart, if you
That's what I'm saying.
scored in the green in reading, we have identified you as tier one. Versus when we've talked at other times, if you go into the school building and you get other reports, you will identify a group of students as tier one students,
Right.
which are typically those students that you said are already performing at grade level and above, whatever the definition is.
Right.
Correct.
And so our schools will use the same set of information, and they will look to see where their students have fallen into each of the categories. And then from that point, they, like Ms. Campson had mentioned, they will then form a 5-week plan leading up to the SOL testing. So the prior designations of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 may change at this point in time. Okay?
Dr. Stewart?
A second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
I thought you were
No, it's
finished. My
okay.
apologies.
No, go ahead.
Did you want to know if you were, which tier you were in? I wrote mine down. Go
But I
ahead.
think I already know the answer, Reverend. In my life's experience, I know the following. Any student, any caring teacher, and that is all of our teachers, sees in that tier where I am, in the red, that means much more time is being dedicated as we speak, as a result of knowing that. The benefit of this kind of in-process analysis is we see where we need more time and we're spending more time. And so we're using a lot of strange terms, but what this means is these are the people who need more help and we're going to give them more time. How am I doing? Does that sound right?
Sounds right.
And Dr. Houston knows where I lie.
Well, I've been invited to a youth monitor, a fifth grader activity over at Chesterfield, and I hesitated to accept the invitation. I hope it isn't a humiliating experience for me, but you.
Well, last year, we did not administer an SOL mock test, so therefore, we can't really compare it. But Ms. Campson is leading us in the efforts of planning for an SOL mock test to occur next year, not only at the elementary level, but at the middle school level, too. Ms. Campson.
This is part of, as we've talked over the last few months, assessment process that we do for our students district-wide so that we can better focus the interventions that we provide and give more time to the children who pop up in red. And it changes. We would not expect to always see the exact children in this. So a lot of times I think we get a little confused between who we're calling children a tier 2 child or this is an example of a performance. They have a tier 2 performance on this assessment. And that I think is what you're trying to get to is, so it changes, and that's the good thing about the way we do our assessments is we do our frequent, we're making our assessments more frequent but much shorter, so we're not over-testing our children, which is a concern that I think Dr. Robinson expressed earlier about doing too much testing. And so the children move because we would hope, as we provide interventions, we have less students that would be identified as tier 3. What this basically tells us is how much time we need to give each of these children in each area. It's really a time management piece for our schools.
Right, but I'll just tell you that the challenge that I consistently have is as we get these updates from period to period, trying to follow what gets explained to us in colors or whatever format in one period to the next period, so that, because I would like to be able to understand if there is a child that has been identified as tier 2 in September, and we're now in May, what does it look like from all the work that we've done from September to where we are now? And that's the piece that I'm still trying to.
That's the most important piece, and that's what our new assessment system is going to try to do, because in schools that already, many of our schools are already doing this on their own. We're just taking it district-wide. What happens in those schools is they actually have people in their school that are assigned to track the various gap groups. And within that, so that you may be the person in your school that's in charge of this, say this was just your school as a whole, so the district who was in charge of pulling out these students with disabilities and tracking those, and then they could track, and when they do that, they track it by child. So you'd be able to track Johnny, or they're pulling out the Hispanic students or the African-American boys, which tends to be a group that's tracked one-on-one. And when you have that, and then you have that person becomes the advocate for that group of children. If I have just 1 second, I'll give you an example that happened in my school, which I try not to bring up too often. But in this case, I was sitting there with my leadership team. The teacher that was in charge of tracking African-American boys, we were going along and we had our assessment data, and we were pulling out the students who were going to be the tier 3 students who were going to get triple dosed, 3 different lessons in reading every single day. And in our school it was 60, anybody 60 below. And so we were looking at the students, and this teacher that was in charge, he's now currently the assistant principal at Jaycox, by the way, said, wait a minute, what about Johnny Brown? And I'm looking at and this is why it's so good to have other people in charge and not just have one person making the decision. And I'm looking and I'm saying, well, he's always coming up yellow, so he's been getting an extra dose, but he isn't turning up in red. And then the teacher said, but he's never hit the cut score. Every single month he's been in yellow. So he's never officially passed or made the cut score or demonstrated proficiency. Therefore, I think he needs the 3rd dose. And he argued for that child, and those are very, you don't have it so many spaces. And so we did that because he had been tracking that one, he was tracking all of those boys, but that one child popped out at him. And we moved that child into the tier 3 group, which meant that child was now going to get a 3rd lesson every day. And the next assessment at the end of the month was the first time all year he broke into green. So
we know that we need to develop an assessment system and an ability to report it to you all in a clear, concise way that would say, student A started here in September. Student A is here in January. And if the board wants to know, well, how did we get student A from September to December or January? This is what we did in terms of interventions.
Right.
Now, where do we expect student A, where do we need student A to be in March? This is what we're going to do to get him or her there, and just repeat that cycle consistently in a way that the average person can understand it. And we know that's our task, and that's what we're going to begin to try to do. Well, if we can take something complex and make it as simple as possible and clear as possible, then I think everybody will understand it and trust the data.
Because again, you're just not speaking to us, you're speaking to the community. The community wants to be able to hear it and understand it in a way that they can say, great job, Norfolk Public Schools. We're going to have a great end of the year. This is a great school year.
Or at least understand where we are.
Absolutely.
4x4 schedule, can you explain to me what you're really noting for us there that we need to
Just letting you know that it's on a different schedule, so we don't have really the same type of assessment results for you because it's on a different schedule.
Is that 4x4 schedule supposed to be research-based, that somehow we are anticipating that, we'll get better results with that? I mean, what's the
Well, I think
behind it?
2 years ago, I think the strategy was that they wanted to try something different for our middle schools, and at this time I'd have to defer to John Coleman and Dr. Charbonnet to share any additional information related to that.
I mean, it doesn't have to be long. I just want to know if it's something, is this a good practice? Is this something that we're going to be looking to change? Just want to try to understand the relationship between the 4x4 and the expected outcomes.
The 4x4 is research-based. There's pros and cons both with the 4x4 and with the year-long. And so, as a district, 2 years ago, a decision was made to essentially pilot it, at the middle school level in those 2 course areas. Preliminary results over the first year and a half that we have results have shown, positive growth in terms of, accreditation results in those both of those areas. A decision has been made that we'll go through, through next year, through January, and look at end-of-year results, as well as results at the end of the first semester next year to determine whether or not we keep going in that direction or not. But it'll be based on looking at the results.
Thank you.
Yes. Talking about block scheduling.
That's correct.
Okay. So when we use terms like 4x4 and things like that, what we're talking about is how we spend our time, how we concentrate our time, how we use our time to help students learn. Block scheduling was initiated 3 decades ago. It has a great deal of research base, particularly in the content areas. Probably daily doses of reading and math is more critical. But there's a great deal of research that says this kind of block scheduling, of how we block our time and how we offer content areas, is unquestionable. It's very beneficial.
Well, and in addition, another example would be, we're doing a little bit of that at the high school level with safety nets, and it's showing some positive results as well.
Decades of research that says it works.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Dr. Houston, Dr. Thornton, and members of the board. I will keep this short and simple for us. Today I'm also joined by several of our senior coordinators because we'll be discussing a proposal for a textbook adoption in the areas of art, music, and mathematics. And I'm joined by Danielle Roby, who is our senior coordinator of music, Bart Irwin, who's our senior coordinator of mathematics, and Dr. Barbara Laws, who's our senior coordinator of art. For all 3 of our adoptions, and any adoption that we do in Norfolk Public Schools, we follow a very similar process that involves forming a review committee. That committee is made up of teachers and administrators. Primarily, we advertise to get input from members of the community, and we ask for volunteers to join on the committee. We review multiple sets of textbooks. All of the textbooks that we review are already approved by the Virginia Department of Education. We look at samples of textbooks and we make those available to members of the community in the schools as well as in the public libraries. We host presentations by the publishers for that selection committee, and then we make our final selection and bring that selection to the board for final approval. For the art adoption, some things that we considered when we were reviewing text would be primarily availability of the textbooks to have a CD or ebook readers, subscription access to art images, as well as online access for our teachers and student textbooks, and ancillary materials as well. Looking at our art adoption, we're looking primarily to do a new adoption for grades 6 through 8. We would like to purchase the books called A Community Connection. For our other areas, we are looking to replenish those textbooks. And you can see those are listed below. The strengths of the textbooks that we are looking at adopting would be their alignment with our standards of learning, their support of thematic and integrated nature of the curriculum and instruction, and the high-quality text visuals, examples, and access to high-quality digital visuals. Moving along to our music adoption, we're looking to replenish at the elementary level, as well as to purchase one new textbook, which is called Game Plan. And just as an aside, when I first saw the name Game Plan, I thought that was our senior coordinator's attack her plan, but that's actually the name of the book. The name of the book is Game Plan, and we're looking to purchase that for grades K through 5. For orchestra, we're looking to replenish our current text and to purchase a new one, which will be called Measures of Success. For band, we're looking to make 2 new purchases, Traditions of Excellence and Sound Innovations for Band. The strengths of those textbooks that we are looking to purchase would be the updated technique and repertoire courses and strategies for differentiated instruction, as well as more assessment options. Moving right along into math, some things that we considered, we wanted to make sure that we did have access to online resources as well as online features of the textbook. We wanted to make sure those were also available on CD as well as for ebook readers. And we will be purchasing class sets as we have done in the past. As you're looking through the different grade levels, you'll notice that we're looking to purchase all new textbooks for K-12, including our AP courses. And I'm not going to read through all of the titles, but they are listed here for you. And again, when looking at the strengths of the book, we ask that the committee examine their alignment with Virginia standards, and they have a very close alignment with the standards of learning, the ease of use for our new teachers, and the strong online component with practice and tutorials. In terms of budgetary considerations, in our proposed fiscal year 16 budget, we have $2.1 million available for a new adoption and $700,000 available for an existing adoption, meaning for the replenishment of books. Our plan, as we're moving forward, certainly would not cover all of the books that we need, so we're looking at doing a phased-in approach over 2 fiscal years. We do not anticipate a new adoption for next school year, so we would have the funds available over the 2-year period. Next steps, of course, we hope that you all will approve our selections today. We will then work with the Department of Purchases and Supply to notify the approved vendors to place those orders so that we would have all of our books in hand by July so that we can start in August and September with heavy professional development that would carry on throughout the entire school year. And that would be the presentation. Yes.
Well, each of the board members have already read all of these textbooks, and I'm sure ready to move on this on the 20th. That's to it.
I'd like to go back to the only yellow print you had on there. Remember the slide with the yellow print regarding the 2-year question? Dr. Thornton, this would be a question that you could help us with. To your knowledge, has there been any reduction in the support of state money for textbook adoption? Has that been reduced, causing that yellow print to be true?
Not in the last 2 bienniums, no. When we were going through the actual recession, there was a pretty significant reduction. And they also delayed some of the adoption requirements, but they have restored, albeit through lottery, much of it.
Right.
The majority of it is coming through lottery.
Lottery money that was supposed to be used for extra money is now supplanted textbook adoption money.
Lottery money is being used for, yes.
And the word supplanted was intentional. The reason why I bring all this up is because as we reach out to our legislators next summer, because remember, they're all up for election this year, senators and delegates, that we speak to the issue of proper funding of textbook adoption so that in the future we won't have to go to 2-year phase-ins. But thank you very much. It's important to know that the supplanting did occur.
So following up on the budget question, if we're going to have to use part of next year's budget to fund what we couldn't this year, is that pushing out further textbook adoption next year that is on schedule?
No, I think Dr. Corbin indicated that we would not have.
That's correct. Normally, we would have had a social studies adoption. However, we're adopting new social studies objectives, standards for next year. So 2017 will be our next adoption.
And then will any of these students be less equipped as a result of not having access to these new books when they are supposedly aligned with the standards, therefore being tested?
No, we don't anticipate having our students should not be falling behind. We do have quite a few supplemental texts and materials that we already use that we believe are currently matched up with our standards. It's just we're on a cycle for replacement, and each time we replace, we try to get closer and closer match. So we're fine with what we have now. We just want to get a little bit better.
Yes, Dr. Gable.
But just forward thinking, I know that the SOL tests for history are going to be updated, and they're in the process of doing that. And as far as textbook adoption, whenever that has to occur for history, as long as we're in alignment with that, and if there's going to be surprise with us needing to adopt a different textbook for alignment of the new history SOLs, just be prepared for it.
Yeah, and I had a similar question with math. So can you update us on where the state is with the new math standards? And if we adopt this, what year of the standards will we be aligned?
And I'm going to let
the process started this spring they sought public comment. So the 2015, 2016 will be process-oriented in terms of revisions on the new standards. The new standards will be starting to be rolled out for final comment 2016, 2017, taught without testing 2017, 2018. So we've got almost 4 to 5 years before it's tested. It's about 3 years before they start being taught. So there is possible overlap, and we brought that up with the companies, and they understand that part of this process is they, and they have brought this up because they were on the last one where there was overlap. They're going to need to adjust if there's any major changes standards-wise. I will say from the state's language, they're hoping for tweaks and not overhaul in the math standards moving forward. So we're not expecting significant changes.
So when we do this adoption, we will be working towards being aligned with 2017 and not.
Well, we won't know the next standards. It's aligned to what we're teaching now, and that'll get us, and we're good to go for at least three more academic years. And the fourth one should be fine. And even when they do make the switch, we're being promised it'll be close. But there's no new standards out yet.
So textbook adoption will be on the agenda, on the consent agenda on the 20th. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 2.03.
Memorandum of Understanding update, Dr. Williford.
Good afternoon, Dr. Thornton, Dr. Houston,
Good afternoon.
members of the board. I want to take this opportunity to update you on the work that we've engaged with the Virginia Department of Education regarding the Memorandum of Understanding for our 3 newly denied schools. As you know, part of the Memorandum of Understanding is that the Virginia Department of Education have responsibility in providing technical assistance to our schools regarding their corrective action plans. And so the last time I presented to you, those technical assistance visits had not been completed. But in updating you today, I wanted you to know that those technical assistance visits have been completed in the warned areas for those schools. And additional recommendations or essential actions have been assigned to those 3 schools. I also provided you earlier the corrective action plans with the signed signatures so that you could see where those additional essential actions have come. And you should know that there weren't any surprises, but this is part of the responsibility of the Virginia Department of Education, part of the agreement that they would come in and do a visit, and then after conducting the visit, we would engage in conversation collaboratively with the administration in regards to the results of the visit, and there would be additional essential actions. We were involved in those. Again, there weren't any surprises. Many of the essential actions in those warned areas involve professional development for teaching and learning, engagement, as well as looking at additional support for special education and et cetera. And so I just wanted to take time to share that with you. Also during the visit, we submitted our quarterly data analysis report for each denied school, and so we've done that now twice. And then we have, and we review during those data analysis meetings, during those quarterly meetings, we review evidence towards completion of the essential action. Our next meeting with the VDOE Office of School Improvement is June the 12th, and if there's any feedback after that meeting, I'll come back and update you on that meeting as well. At this time, I wanted to open up if you have any questions regarding the Memorandum of Understanding, our progress corrective action plans, et cetera. Take any questions that you have right now.
All right, Mr. Jordan?
Always try to yield. You had just mentioned that the additional essential actions they get added. What prompts that? I mean, at some point in time, should we get to the point where we aren't seeing additional essential actions added? And
I think we should look at the essential actions as tasks. The document is a fluid document, and when in the memorandum of understanding, when it was stated that we would meet each quarter, when we go and have those discussions, essential actions could emerge just to continue to guide the school improvement process until the schools become fully accredited. So when we look at this process itself, if we go back remembering that back in January, after meeting with teachers and staff and community from each school, we created our own essential actions based off the academic review. It was only, it was aligned, and again, in the memorandum of understanding for the VDOE to come with their instructional folk to look at what we were doing instructionally. If you look at the original corrective action plans, we didn't have much meat in there in regards to, or meat specifically regarding the warned areas. Now we do. I would like to also think that now that that corrective action plan is complete, you don't see as much weight as we saw originally on the principals and the central office in terms of monitoring, but that responsibility for carrying out different tasks, it's become more of a partnership with the VDOE and things that they will provide to support our efforts in becoming fully accredited. It's hard to anticipate what will come from the next meeting, but what we would do is, I'm anticipating ensuring that we're on the right path, and as long as we're on the right path and headed towards accreditation, making progress towards that piece, then I would say that no, we wouldn't want additional essential actions, but they could happen.
is it somewhere then maybe when you present to us to be able to let us know the difference between something that you all consider to be a new item versus something that's just a continuing task? Because it's just hard to really get a grasp on it when you just keep seeing more essential actions and not really have an understanding of if it's, just, I want to be.
Progression.
Well, I don't want to say
changes.
busy work, but to be able to separate something that's really new that maybe we haven't caught before versus something that was previously identified and we're still working towards reaching.
Yes, sir. In fact, the next update, I'll do that for you just to make it clear if there's additional essential actions, you'll be able to know that.
Quick, in IndyStar, I noticed that looks like most of the schools are updating pretty regularly, and there's at least one school that seems to be lagging behind. Is there any reason for that, or are all of them supposed to be on a particular schedule?
They should be updating monthly. Okay. We should update monthly, especially the schools in the school improvement cluster. It's very important that they update each month, and they're getting feedback from our senior coordinators, school improvement administrators, as well as VDOE contractors.
And then lastly, professional development. We keep hearing about that. We heard about it last year. We're hearing about it again. We talked about it. If that maybe some future work session, y'all can really help us to get a handle on, are we on track? Are we behind? Are there resources that you need? But so we constantly hear about professional development. I know I struggle with really getting a sense of where we are with it. So I would just ask if maybe on a future work session you can help us get our arms around that.
Just to piggyback off that, that's spot on, simply because we always hear about professional development. We don't know as a board, what exactly is going on. and that's a major part of our budget, so I would suggest that we get a better handle of what we're spending our money on.
And we talked about that as recent as this past Tuesday in Cabinet, the need to really take a comprehensive look at what we're doing with our professional development, particularly as we plan for next year, so we can see in a holistic way what we're trying to accomplish with it and which targets are we trying to meet with it, given our resources. So that's something, again, that we've acknowledged we need to do in a more systematic way, in a clear way, so you will understand and our staff will understand where we're going with professional development.
All right, Stewart.
Under Campus Stella Corrective Action Plan, going to not the cover page, but the second page of the document. On the right side, under documentation required to support. Almost at the bottom, implement lesson plans. Help me with that terminology. I know this cannot explain all that we're talking about here, but just the wording of that leads me in a direction I don't want to go. But is there anything negative in this, or is this just saying implement improvements? It's just the wording of that is a little bit different.
And I would have to go back to the essential action where it says we would provide professional development to mathematics, history, science staff on increasing student engagement, level of critical thinking, and content and pedagogical knowledge.
Yes, sir.
Then you have the persons responsible for providing that professional development, and also there's an implement under responsible essential action where it says classroom teachers, and then the monitoring piece, which involves the chief academic officer and the principal. And so where it says implement parallel here under the documentation, that becomes the evidence where we would look for that professional development for increasing engagement or critical thinking. We would look for that in the lesson plans. We would look for that in the classroom assessments and also in our observations.
So what I'm not going to read into this is that it wasn't existing and they want it to exist. What they're saying is there's just some refinements going on and they want to see those refinements.
Absolutely. Keeping in mind that going back to our academic review audit, it's the level of implementation and a lot of our academic review going back to that document, we may have had functional, where we're functioning in this area, but we want to fully implement, and there are indicators to show that we're fully implementing at a level to get us to full accreditation.
I'm going to hesitate to read anything negative in that. That's only positive.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Houston, in my haste to move this along, I inadvertently jumped over teacher workload update by Dr. Malisi, so she'll come forward.
Richard Davis.
This is actually all four of us. I don't know if my colleagues want to, not just me. Okay, and while they're getting up, for the sake of time, I'll begin. On April 23rd, we gathered together a focus group of teachers by your direction, and worked with them about ideas that they have about things that could be taken off their plate. We selected them from the 2014 Teachers of the Year. Each of us randomly selected some of our schools to be represented. We had elementary, middle, and high represented at that meeting. We had them work in groups and come up with some ideas. They did come up with numerous ideas. However, we chose the ones that were recurring, and the top three turned out to be lesson plans, assessments, and you're going to hear it again, professional development. So for lesson plans, their suggestions were to drop the SchoolNet upload requirement, not drop the lesson plan requirement. So they would like to write lesson plans and not have to upload them into SchoolNet. and have one centralized lesson plan format, which is already in progress. And so that was that. They would like us to revisit our assessment schedule and the frequency of local assessments on all levels. And they would also like us to revisit our professional development offerings along the line of what Dr. Thornton was talking about, just making sure everything is in alignment and that we articulate to them the exact plan. So, having now been armed with that information, we continue to discuss this at Cabinet. We've already started the discussion. We will continue to discuss these top three plus some others. We will be meeting academic affairs, teaching and learning, teacher representatives, principal representatives, executive directors will all meet to determine what adjustments are viable to our current practice that are in the best interest, of course, of students. So that's where we are with that. Anybody want to add? Question?
Okay, questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Gabriel, and then Reverend Hayward.
So as far as the next steps go, would this be something that we could look at as far as the suggestions that have come from the workload that will be implemented by the school year next year?
Yes.
Reverend Hayward?
Teacher representatives noted here, is this part of the teacher association that we
Yes.
recommended that you?
Yes.
Do? Okay, thank you.
Dr. Stewart?
I hope before June 30th, individually, you tell me of the barriers you've removed, because there have been many. I have to tell you anecdotally, as I've moved around, several principals have said, if it weren't for X, one of you, I don't know what I would have done this year. So I know there are many of them. But the great thing that you've done here is you've really listened, particularly under the lesson plan issue and whatever. And I think that that's going to be a huge barrier, just listening at all. That's been long-standing, and I'd like to thank you. But I certainly would like it if each of you would grab me individually and tell me of something that I don't know about, but there certainly is an atmosphere out there of gratitude for some barriers that you have removed. And I won't embarrass each of you by telling you how I know all of that, but it's complimentary.
Thank you.
And along the same lines, I appreciate your comments, Dr. Stewart. When we talk about climate, it goes an awful long way just for teachers to know that somebody cares, somebody's listening, somebody's paying attention and willing to consider, the workload and what they've been asked to do, and willing to make some changes. So that in and of itself, I totally agree. Just listening goes a long way, and so I appreciate those who kind of made sure that we went down this road, and I thank you all for the presentation. Reverend Hayward.
Question. Is there a movement on the state level to reduce the teacher responsibilities that would, impact what you're trying to do here?
I can't speak to that either, not that I know of.
Oh, they piling it on.
You may be referring to the gubernatorial initiative regarding testing
Yeah,
to
testing, yeah.
remove some of the unnecessary pressures. And I think the commission is looking at a variety of ways to do things more rationally.
As far as testing, I've heard a lot about the testing reduction, not only in this state, all over the country.
Right.
As far as just workload in general, nothing's come across that I've seen.
I too agree that the fact that the board this was a concern of the board over several years, and so to see this come about is a good thing. And I think that's very much needed on the part of the teachers. I'm just kind of curious as to how this impacts the cycle of results, and in terms of the assessments and the professional development and so forth. Because I know that all of these things are part of that whole cycle there. And so this adjustment must be a very fine adjustment that you're doing.
Well, I'm personally of the opinion that you can always become more efficient at what you do. And as you see, the very last statement says in the best interest of students. So that is, of course, at the foremost of our concerns. And at that point, the cycle for results is how we service our students. And so none of that will be compromised or can be compromised, but we can always become more efficient. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
I think that's the key word, the efficiency of it. We know there's value, but we've got to make sure that it's smart, that it's well ordered, it's targeted, it's focused, it's concise, and it's clear. And then I think perhaps it'll demonstrate the value of doing it. And perhaps staff will be willing to invest their time in it.
Mm-hmm.
If they know that it's efficient, it's headed somewhere, it's just not random acts. There does not appear to be any order or finish line to it. Is that fair?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dr. Robinson and
I just want to make sure everybody's done with this particular topic, because there's something, just kind of a tangent on that I want to go off very short. I don't want to, go ahead then. No.
In your looking at this, did you see any differentiation between schools, like school clusters, schools that were in school improvement versus schools that weren't, anything like that?
No, and we made sure we had a really good mix and looked at that especially, and
Just across the board.
Well, I just wanted to say, prior to doing this, Dr. Malisi and I had worked with a group of about 80 teachers for several months.
Mm-hmm.
And these teachers were from every school, every elementary school in Norfolk. And it was just amazing at the alignment. They saw the same things that these teachers of the year thought were issues that we needed to deal with. So I thought that was some good alignment and some confirmation that these are the things that we need to be working on.
In a future meeting, work session, I would request that we get some information on the mentoring system, on how we take our new teachers, our first-year teachers, our second-year teachers. What's the process for mentoring them from the beginning, and how to help them through this process? Because it's become apparent to me that the colleges are not fully preparing the students for the real world. So I would like to see how MPS affects that and help. I can only see that help with retention.
Okay.
Got it.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll break the schedule for after the next item. However, the communications team need to change the tape for our next segment. When we return after the break, we will make a slight adjustment to the agenda so that we could go ahead and get our PPEA update. Mr. Williams from the city is here to provide that. We want him to be able to present and prepare for the city's budget here this evening. So we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll continue.